Hi everyone. Welcome to AERM Live, where we are going to be talking about royal costs, the cost of monarchies, particularly in Sweden, Netherlands, and the UK. I'm joined here by Ollie Nickvist from Sweden and Floris Müller from the Netherlands, and I'm from the UK, of course, from Republic. You can use the comments to ask us questions, and we'll pick those out as we go. We're just going to sort of go through and have a bit of a chat about how there is a huge difference between the official and actual costs of the monarchies, how they get away with it, the secrecy, and what sort of how it compares, I guess, to other republics, similar republics in Europe. So certainly for us, we've been looking at this for a long time in the UK. We've got a report about it, putting our figure a lot higher than the official figure at £345 million compared to the current figure of 82.4 million, which is also a lot higher than it was a few years ago, at around 40 million. So Floris, you've done some research on this and you've got a similar problem. Is that right? The official figure is a lot lower than what you've calculated.
As far as I know, that the royal family has published the total cost of its institution for the last 10 or 15 years, and it's always been around 40, 45, 49. The latest figure is 49.4 million euros as they published it. Just looking at the numbers seriously, you come to a much bigger amount, so almost 350 million. And it's ridiculous. It's 7 times as high as published. So yeah.
And I think the same is true with Sweden, where I think you've done a similar report to ours. Is that just out recently? Is that right, Ollie?
Yeah, it was published earlier this month, July, and we do it on a yearly basis now. We've taken inspiration from the UK and pretty much come to the same conclusion, basically, that the official number is not true. The official number is about 134 million crowns, which is about 13 million euros, and we've come to the conclusion, counting everything, and honestly, we've been sort of estimating it at a conservative rate, but putting the figure closer to 1.5 billion crowns, so approximately 144 million euros, which is about 11. It's estimated to be about 11 times as high as the official number, basically.
And what's causing this discrepancy? What's missing from the official ones? I mean, the big thing for us, I guess, is security costs, which are estimated around £100 million. We've also got land such as the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, which hand over tens of millions of pounds to the Queen and Prince Charles. Have you got? Is it similar stuff that's missing? I mean, what is it that's missing from the official?
Well, I think if you look at the Dutch situation, we have certain. So these numbers are actually known, but they're just not put into the budget. The only thing that we count is certain trips that the royal family makes and their allowance that they receive every year. That's just it. But if you just dig a little bit deeper, look at different departments of our government, at the Ministry of Agriculture, at the Ministry of Defense, you'll find that they've just hid these different costs there as well. And they've just let out certain costs, meaning they use the royal airplane and they just don't make any note of it that they do, or don't make any note of the fact that this cost was used on them. And there is, I think, a rather particular thing for the Netherlands is that our royal family is very, very rich. And of this 350 million that we calculated, the majority comes from the fact that they have all these tax exemptions, as in they have stock in various companies, as we know, and they don't pay any tax on that. They don't pay any wealth tax. They don't. And no income tax, nothing. And obviously, if you give that as a little bonus to the monarchy, I think you should use it in your calculation.
In the Swedish Yeah, sorry, like the Swedish situation is fairly similar, especially when it comes to UK, in that security costs are, of course, not in there. And that's a huge cost that's just not budgeted for in the same way. And as you said, Flores, it's hidden away in other forms of budgets and other places. And also, we sort of also estimated the implicit losses that we garner from not renting out public spaces and lands and estates, buildings and whatnot, that could be basically publicly funded places that could be used a lot better and more efficiently had it not been for the monarchy. So if you gather that information as well, of course, the cost multiplies.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've also got tax involved in that. It's very difficult to know how much tax we've lost. It's just the Queen and Prince Charles who don't have to pay tax. Charles voluntarily pays personal income tax on his income from Duchy of Cornwall, but he claims an awful lot against tax, which other people probably wouldn't get away with. And the Duchy of Cornwall operates identically to any company or corporation, but it doesn't pay corporation tax. And the Queen doesn't have to pay tax. It was reported in the early 90s that she had agreed to do so, but they refused to give any details. So she could be paying £1 a year tax for all we know, and then she gets to say she pays tax. So it's a bit of a guess, but that's another big chunk.
What I'm interested in is I referred to it just for a very short note just now. Is if you look at the official cost in Holland, that it's mostly like some very small costs on trips, on things they do, and on their personal salary. Is that the same for Britain and for Sweden? What was that amount, that official amount, made up of?
Well, in the Swedish case, the official amount is just the sort of yearly allowance or appanage that we pay, which is broken down into two separate categories. Basically, a half goes to the royal family and half goes to maintenance and whatnot for castles and so the official number is just that allowance, but of course that's not all the money. So it's a big discrepancy in what's counted and what's not counted when it comes to what we pay for the monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, the £82 million that we've got, up until about 5 years ago, it was closer to 40 million. And that's the core of the annual grant, which is on staff, running costs. There is travel in there, I think, and various other bits and pieces. The extra 40 million was because they decided to throw millions of pounds at renovating Buckingham Palace, because it had been neglected for so many years, for decades, and so they decided to add a whole load of money onto the grant. For 10 years they increased the grant by around 40 to 50 million pounds a year. I mean it's a very strange thing, because they don't decide how much they need. They just give them the equivalent of 25% of income that the country gets from something called Crown Estates, which is a property portfolio that's owned by the country. It makes no sense at all, but because it's called Crown Estates, it allows people to think that the royals own that and therefore paying their own way. So if the Crown Estates makes a huge profit, or their profits go up next year by 50%, then the royal grant goes up by 50%. So, but there's a catch in it, which means that if the profits go down, then the grant stays where it is. It doesn't go down. So it's a beautiful arrangement for them, but it means that we have no real idea how big that grant's going to get over the next few years. It could exceed £100 million fairly quickly. But yeah, there's a big chunk of that is renovating the palace. And I mean, we said at the time, yeah, that's fine. It belongs to us, that palace, so we should pay for it. But why did you leave it to fall apart for 60 years? That is negligence. And there should be some questions asked. So we've said, well, open it up to palaces, to tourists. Sorry, let tourists in and all year round and pay for tickets. They don't want to do that. The taxpayer keeps on paying.
Maybe
do you also have local costs as well? If they go visiting some town or school or something, does the local police or local council end up spending money?
They do, actually. We have in Holland, we have a so-called thing as King's Day, in which every year on the birthday of the king, the royal family visits one town or a couple of villages in the Netherlands, and obviously that comes with enormous costs. They've always been defending it, that it puts this particular town on television, gives it a lot of free publicity. And people will go on and visiting the place. Well, it was never proven that people actually go to the places where the king has been. And they say, the local restaurants, bars really profit from it. Same counts there. There's no. But then city governments actually pay a lot. And over the last couple of years, I see that in the Netherlands, some local authorities have been asking questions. Do we have to spend €1 million on King's Day? Whereas we could use that money on other things, on healthcare, on care for the elderly. So yeah, it's most costs can just disappear if you have others pay for it.
I think yes, but not necessarily in the Swedish case, because security costs, or whether or not it's police or whatever, that's state costs, no matter what. Local police, it's basically nationally funded, so it doesn't detract from local taxes or whatnot. But of course, you have a lot of things being built, and you have parades, and you have a lot of embellishments in the city. So yeah, you of course have local costs, but not from a security standpoint, probably.
And we did a rough estimate by taking a sample of visits and so on. We worked out its conservative estimate is probably around £22 million a year spent by local councils collectively on royal trips. And we know that in 2012, the Queen went to Leicester she was probably there for 4 hours, went to visit a university there. And between the university, the police and the council, it cost the city about £180,000 for a 4-hour visit, which I guess they could.
How's that in Britain? Is there like local is there local protest against these massive costs? As again, we've had visits to cities that are not the most wealthy in the world, and people say, why should we spend hundreds of thousands of euros, maybe €1 million, on just one visit of a couple of hours? So we've had on local level, we definitely have had some protests against that. But that died out quite easily afterwards. How's that for Britain?
We don't really. I mean, mainly because people just don't know that this is happening. You need to do the research. You need to, the council won't announce this. We have to do a freedom of information request to the police, to the council, to whoever else. So we're hopefully some point this year we're going to start to do that more systematically for like a year. For 2019, for example, sort of take a whole year and start sending out loads of requests and sort of properly get under that. But one of the other things we were going to pick up on, and obviously people watching, don't forget to ask questions in the comments, and we'll pick some of those up as we go. I mean, there's a whole issue of secrecy and accountability. I mean, I know you said that, Floris, that a lot of the stuff is just, you can see it, but it's just not counted in the official royal cost. You've got to go finding it in other budgets and things. I mean, certainly for us, a lot of it is hidden away. And that £100 million cost of security, for example, they refuse to say how much security costs. They think that if we knew, we could work out what their security arrangements are, and that would put the royals at risk. I have no idea how that logic works, but that's how it is.
I have the exact same remark when we said, this is the amount of money you spend on security, or our calculation. People who were in favor of the monarchy actually said, you can't really get into that, because then you'll make clear how that is spent. I don't get that. If you just give a lump sum amount, you don't say how you spend it. But it's, it plays on fear. It plays on if we say how much it really costs, security risks involved.
Yeah, but I think that goes to the heart of the issue, that it is held in secrecy, right? And there's very little transparency. And we in Sweden, we have one of the most expensive Freedom of Information Acts in the world, and yet the the royals are exempt from this, and it has at times, especially from us, been raised that we want more transparency within how the money is spent, and we've had pushback from the royals in that case. The king famously said that no one wants to know how many hot dogs he eats a year, but it really goes to show that they're very cavalier about the whole thing, that they don't want this transparency, and that's why you have all the secrecy, because you have a huge waste and extravagance of the monarchy, and that's really the symptom here. And then they're pretty much unaccountable and can operate with a far greater degree of secrecy than any other entity in the state.
No. I think if I can ask you both one question, because it really, if I look at the comments as well, this touches the secrecy. It touches one really big question, which I can't really answer. Well, I can for Holland a bit, but what I don't understand is both the UK as Sweden have now published their numbers, which is just an open and honest investigation. I think that most people would acknowledge that it's a little bit more the costs than officially mentioned. How is it that people still accept? Why is there no protest against the major cost for the monarchy in Britain or in Sweden? As people protest every expenditure where it's a little bit higher than normal, why don't people protest against this?
I mean, certainly in the UK, I think people are more likely to protest where there are cuts to things that they need, and big numbers like, you know, hundreds of millions and billions and whatever don't mean an awful lot to people. But if there is a thing that is being cut or not funded that they need, like a hospital ward or, you know, police station or whatever, then they might be more inclined to protest that. But there is certainly an abuse of money, or an apparent abuse of money, or suggestion, as there's been recently, that we buy a royal yacht for the Queen, as she used to have up until about 20 years ago. You know, if that comes into the news, and the public reaction is always hostile. People don't, you know, they tolerate the royals on the whole. I mean, some people love it, but on the whole, they tolerate it, but they don't want them to cost them too much. And the other thing is that, which I know we're going to get onto, is that people think that the cost is offset by large financial gains, and that really does dampen down a lot of that hostility. So, and that, a lot of that comes back to the secrecy and the spin. You know, it's all about, you know, we're not going to tell you everything. And by the way, look over there. You know, there's a nice shiny thing that's going to bring tourists in. So, you know, it is a constant challenge to get beyond all that nonsense and say, no, sorry, but this is one family. They're spending millions of pounds, which could otherwise be spent on thousands of nurses or teachers or whatever. And I think, I mean, you know, our official figure is getting traction in the press. You know, quite often gets quoted, and we've had journalists in some unlikely newspapers that usually support the monarchy saying that our figure is much more accurate. So, you know, there is we're making some headway on that.
Can I just pull out one question which I find very interesting? It's been out of Danke, who has actually asked a question in both Swedish, if I'm not mistaken, as in Dutch. Find it very interesting. In Holland, if you would like to know the real ask, there is this Freedom Information Act. You could have what we call a BOP-verzoek, in which you can ask for documents and information. Why is that not applied to the royal Dutch royal family or the British? And let me first reply to that from the Dutch side, is that first of all, I think you can ask the government to tell how much we spend on the royal family, but again, not a lot of questions are asked by local or national politicians. And secondly, our Prime Minister quite recently said that our financial system of our royal family is so incredibly difficult that he even doesn't understand. And we uphold this system just to keep everything well, in place. As long as you keep it very difficult for nobody to understand, it stays like that. But obviously, yes, and a lot of questions have been asked, especially by our Dutch commercial station RTL News, who's been asking, especially about reparation of the boat, the private boat of our royal family, and then the answers are quite vague, and they always refer to this official amount of 59 million euros. So the answers are quite vague. I don't know how does that work in Britain and in Sweden. To start with you, Oliver.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I agree with you that the issue there isn't that you cannot find them. It's just that they're not easily found. Like, you can ask for documents, but you have to piece together. Like, we have to piece it together for this report, right? But you can't find it easily in a compiled version anywhere else. So when you ask the questions, how much do we spend on the monarchy, you get the official number. Well, this is what they get. But of course, that's not what we spend. It answers a different questions, really, and when we compile it's very clear how much we actually spend. What we cannot do is ask, well, the money that we give you, the royals, what do you spend on in return? Like, there's no transparency there. Like in any other form of state entity, like any other department, you can ask for receipts, you can ask for, like, it's very transparent, but we cannot do that with the royal. So that's really where we can't ask those questions. But what we as a country spend on the royals, we can piece that together from official documents, but it's not easily it's not easily found. You have to do a lot of the footwork yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the government, any government department in this country, you can do an FOI request and ask them various bits of information, but the palace itself, you can't. They're not covered by the Freedom of Information Act, and communications between the palace and government are exempt. And there's I mean, I've already mentioned the security, but travel, anything, I think it's any single item under £15,000 isn't itemized, so you don't know what it is. So you only really see the individual costs of some large trip. Because I mean, £15,000 should get you quite a long way. Although they do take large entourages and helicopters and things, so it does get expensive. But they refuse to reveal a lot of that smaller detail within that travel cost for no good reason. And I tried a Freedom of Information request on the Royal Train. They have their own train, which is ridiculous. And I was trying to find out how much it's used, who uses it, and so on. And the Network Rail said they didn't know. They said it runs on their tracks, but they don't know much about it. They just get told when it's running. And then they pointed me to a private company that actually is contracted to run it for them. And they're a private company who aren't covered by the Freedom of Information Act. So I guess I can try the Department of Transport next, but if I go to the palace and say, give me the breakdown of what, who's been using it when, I'm not going to get anywhere. So that's a problem. There was a question that I saw about Tower of London, Marco.
Oh yeah, I saw that, yeah.
This is an interesting point as well, but because I think, Ollie, you mentioned the lost income from places which would otherwise be
the implicit loss of revenue,
or opened as museums and whatever. And we've made this point. In fact, MPs have made this point as well, that Buckingham Palace is only open a small part of it for 2 months of every year. And we are now left with this huge £40 million a year bill, when the Tower of London, which is a much, much older building and would probably cost a lot more to maintain, is open all year round to tourists. It's one of the top tourist destinations in London and in the UK. And it raises its own revenue, and it is able to fund itself. So there is this huge question mark as to why can't Buckingham Palace be part of the funding for the royals? They keep telling us this is a great tourist destination, but they don't let tourists in to generate those funds, which they would get.
Well, it's the interesting thing, because I know that everybody always compares like a presidency with the monarchy. I've lived in New York for a year, and I visited Washington on numerous occasions. And the interesting thing is, you can visit the White House every day of the week, see every room. Well,
Yes.
not every room. Yeah, the West Wing is exempt, but apart from that, this is and it's regarded as a building that is used for a public position. So why not set it open for people to see? I don't understand. And what I really don't understand.
There was a committee of MPs about 15 years ago that put this point to representatives of Buckingham Palace, saying, why can't you open it up all year? And they said, oh, well, it's a working building, lots of important stuff going on in there. And the MPs were like, well, the White House is open, the Vatican is open, all these other places are open to tourists all year round. And there's really no justification. It's a large building. I mean, the idea that it's all full of important meetings.
And then I come to this point where I really don't understand that people actually accept this. We've had a renovation of one of our royal palaces over the last couple of years, 150 million euros. And then a group of journalists was let in. They were able to take a couple of pictures of a couple of rooms, and that's it. Thank you for your money. Thank you for your 150 million or 140 million euros. Really nice. We've got 4 pictures. Bye now. Well, even like the private rooms were funded with public money, and still people go like, all right, that's it.
This sort of brings us on to the bigger issue of financial benefits, which we're told about.
Yeah.
And I've just done a video on our YouTube thing, which is out next week, I think, responding to a report that came out in 2012, and then it from a private company called Brand Finance, and they did this report as a PR stunt, really, for themselves, where they put a value of something like £44 billion is the value of the British monarchy to Britain, and it would add every year something like £1.8 billion to our economy, and it was complete nonsense. And they were a big part of that is the estimated £500 million every year that comes in through tourism as a result of the monarchy, which we have debunked, and it simply isn't true. But these figures still keep going around, and they're fairly easy to debunk as well. I mean, it doesn't take very long to look at them and say, well, that clearly isn't the case. I mean, does this? I remember that I was surprised to hear when we were in Amsterdam a few years ago that people thought that the Dutch monarchy had this sort of draw into the Netherlands. And I can tell you that when the Queen abdicated, when was that, 2013? Yeah. The most common reaction in the UK was, I had no idea the Dutch had a monarchy. So, but I'm sure the neighbours, your immediate neighbours, probably.
I must say that. What I've heard a lot is we don't use this argument of tourism. We do use it for trade. People who are in favor of the monarchy say that because our king goes along on these international trade trips, obviously people are more impressed and do better business. But the whole tourist case, we don't use that a lot. As I can't believe I live in the very heart of Amsterdam. If I look at most of the tourists, I don't believe that anybody goes there for the royal family. As we don't, in the very heart of Amsterdam, we have the Royal Palace on Dam Square, which is closed and is not very well known as a tourist attraction at all. So it's a really great building, but you can't get inside. But nobody goes to Amsterdam for the Royal Palace on Dam Square.
No, and I think in the 2016 Republican primary in the U.S., Marco Rubio said that he thought that Bernie Sanders should be the president of Sweden, which of course made people make fun of him because, well, it's a monarchy. But I think that goes to show something about people don't really think of Sweden, they think of the royals. And actually we have a committee, a government committee that I don't know measures, but they keep track of the picture of Sweden abroad. Like, what do people think of when they think about Sweden? What feelings do they have towards Sweden and Swedish people? And the royal family is very rarely at the forefront of that. We have things like Ingmar Bergman, IKEA, ABBA, that sort of thing. But the royal family is very rarely talked about or even mentioned. I mean, so it would be hard pressed to argue. What?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that our royal family is
a lot more known,
famous for all sorts of reasons. Partly because we're a bigger, more powerful country, I guess. For a lot of people, we share a language which most people understand. We have a certain history and so on that people recognise. But and I've often said, people say, oh, the Queen's world famous, but she's world famous not because she's a queen, but because she's the queen of this particular country. Yeah. People know Britain and they look at it and recognise it and see it in the news. But even then, I think most people outside the UK have a fairly sketchy idea of who the royals are and what they're there for and what they do. They will recognise the Queen, but they won't recognise many of the others, if any.
Well, if I can make one point, the interesting thing is, obviously, if I go to London, yes, I think I will visit Buckingham Palace just to see. But this is a palace. This is not the royal institution. It's not because you have a monarchy that I go to Buckingham Palace. If I go to France, because that point was made with James, I go to Versailles. Well, they don't have a monarchy anymore. So it's the fact, cultural heritage and the fact that we have this institution right now are two completely different things. And I don't think anybody visits London because it's a monarchy. And people are like, oh, that's a really great country to go to because Harry and Meghan live there or used to live there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there have been comedians over here that sort of, saying, oh, people are flicking through the travel brochure and go, oh, look, they don't elect their head of state. Let's go there. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, we've done a video on the tourism thing for the UK, and it's so widely. Something like 80% of the people in this country think that they're good for tourism. But even that 500 million figure that is the best they've ever come up with represents a tiny little fraction of our, something like 0.03% of our tourism industry. Yeah. So it just doesn't, even if it's true, which it's not, it's a tiny little fraction. I also say that, we should not base our constitution on what tourists enjoy doing on their holiday. And that's
that's a different issue. But yeah, I agree. Like when we talk about costs, of course, that's not the main issue. Why we take issue with the monarchy, but it is important to talk about because it's something that we hear about often. How beneficial it is from an economic standpoint.
And apart from that, I don't think that a royal family, if it would attract people, if people would go to London or to Sweden. Because of a royal family, I don't think it if you compare it with the presidency, that it's particularly more popular. I think if you look at the attention presidencies everywhere get, and especially the American presidency. I was in America during the election of Obama. That really gets people in because they can feel something with it. I don't think that. I think there is no comparison there, and. I don't think. Well, I think the whole idea of people going to London or to Sweden because it's a royal monarchy.
There was a point. There's a question here from, is it Jan or Jan Magnuson about the royal art collection or the royal collection. When the royal collection includes the crown jewels as well, but it's usually thought of as being the art that is in the palaces, and we don't know how much it is, what the value of it is. I've been told, but that the royals have one of the largest Van Gogh collections in the world, amongst many others. Although when I went into the palace as a tourist a few years ago, they only had rather dull paintings and portraits of royals on the walls. But my point really on that is that Buckingham Palace, if the royals weren't living there, would be an amazing internationally renowned art gallery and museum. You could close the Mall and Constitution Hill that goes up the side. You could get rid of the gates and the fences, and open it up and turn it into a world-class museum and art gallery, which showing off all that art that we've got hidden away. So I think we would be better off tourist wise if they were part of our history.
Getting into the question of Jan Magnussen, I know that the Dutch royal family, because that's very well known, owns quite a lot of art. That's the same with the UK. They own that art, or is that part of?
Well, it's hard to say sometimes who owns what. I, as far as I'm aware, most of it is owned by the Crown, which means by the state. And we would have to sort of work that out. I mean, ultimately, I think there's also a moral question of, you wouldn't expect the royals to walk off with it in a republic. So some of it is owned by them, I guess, but on the whole, it is a national treasure. And I think actually the way they put it is that they hold it in trust for the nation, which is a nice way of saying we will have it and you guys pay for it and look after it. So.
Because that's a little bit different in Holland. I know that the royal family owns quite some art, and quite recently we've had quite an affair around that. A princess died, and afterwards a part of her art collection was sold, and it was offered internationally. It wasn't even offered among Dutch institutions. It was just, how can we get as much out of this collection as possible? Let's sell it on the national market, and for the rest, we don't care about the Dutch. So, because that's always used here in the Netherlands, if you look at the royal art, the argument that at least this royal family keeps this art collection, which is very important for the country, keeps it together. No, they don't, because if they want to sell it off,
they'll just sell it. Yeah.
And keeping it together in one place is pointless if no one can see it. We were going to also just pick up quickly on, we're talking about costs, and one of the things people say to me is, well, that's all very good, but republics cost just as much, and they usually point to France and the US. Now, the obvious point here is that we're not proposing to have that kind of system, and the US and French presidents are, as well as heads of state, they're also heads of government, so of course they're going to be more expensive. The comparison that we make usually is with Republic of Ireland, which is somewhere in the region of £10 million a year. And that would be the salary, the cost of an office, some security, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what's included in that. I don't think the security is included in that figure, but no, it's so much smaller than the cost of the monarchy. I mean, what do you normally look to your neighbours, or in which countries have you looked at as comparisons?
Well, for our sake, like this year, we for the first time made a comparison with Finland, which is a republic, and we found that the monarchy was more expensive in every single way except for one, and it was election. The Finnish election costs more comparatively to the Swedish. But as you can see from this graph, even if you count that in, even if you include that in the final cost, the monarchy is way more expensive than the Finnish Republic. So, yeah, I feel like that argument is, well, just not true.
Yeah.
We made a very thorough comparison there.
Most debate in Holland ends with the whole remark that if we would be a republic, it would cost as much as it does now to have a monarchy. And obviously that is not true, because if you look at the actual cost, it is mostly built up out of personal expenses, personal income, and I think if we would elect a president or a leader, I don't think Holland would be ready for a president, but a different kind of republic. If you would just elect a representative, then you can have a form of control that. Costs don't add up like this, and I don't think anybody will accept a leader getting so much on personal income. If you look at the cost of our royal family, when our crown princess turns 18, she will get as much money as the best paid doctor in the country. She will get 280,000 euros, and that is tax free, so she doesn't have to pay any tax. Doesn't make any sense. So that's concerning the Netherlands. The whole debate ends with, if you have a republic, it will cost as much as and I don't believe it will.
No, of course not. And the whole point of democracy is it's about control and choice. And you can say, okay, if it's going to, then that's because we've decided that's what it's going to cost. But we can see the costs, we can measure it, we can hold the head of state accountable if they are spending too much. I mean, one of the things I was looked at recently for one of our YouTube videos was their homes and palaces, which has come up. Someone, I think, answering someone else's comment, Kev Barnhill, saying that the Queen owns Sandringham, all the others are ours, referring to all the homes and things. This Balmoral in Scotland apparently also belongs to the Queen, but they have something like more than 20 homes around the UK, which we, the taxpayer, pay for, own, and have to provide 24-hour security to. That's a huge security operation. Aside from the fact that Balmoral is an estate in Scotland near Aberdeen, which is larger in land size than Liverpool. Sandringham, which is in Norfolk, about an hour by train from London, is larger than a number of large towns in the UK. These are large areas of land, and quite a few of them have got a number of homes on them. Then you've got a number of homes within Kensington Palace, and so on and so forth. And this is a huge expense. Why are we as taxpayers and citizens of this country allowing our head of state to dish out more than 20 palatial homes to her extended family? I mean, you just wouldn't get away with that in somewhere like Ireland or Germany or Finland.
No, and that's also an interesting point, because when you talk about, well, okay, compare it to Republic, well, just compare per head, like what does the royals cost to compare to any other public figure? And in Sweden, they are by far the most expensive, most expensive public figure. It costs about 21 million euros per working royal, and that's a huge amount of money. So, of course, just comparing within the country itself, we don't have to compare to another republic. We can just compare our officials. And then the monarchy is way more expensive than any other public figure.
Yeah. Your report, Ollie, is that available on your website?
It is. I'm not sure we have a full translation, but the Swedish version definitely is. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Flores, have you got one published?
Yes. We have the report that was from 2018, but I think it's still rather accurate. If anything, I think that the total amount of money is even bigger after 2 years. As we've learned quite recently, our government voted for a raising of the personal income of the king, and this was on the very first weeks of the corona crisis. Still, people accept that this family gets more. So yeah, you can find it, or in any Dutch media, because we've got quite some publicity with that.
Cool. I was just going to point that out. If people want to find these, all this information, a lot of it is on the relevant websites. We've got to sort of wrap up in a moment. Just one quick thing. Dean Roberts says that the Queen still owns the Tower of London, so your argument about tourism is mute in your statement. Well, no, the Crown owns the Tower of London, as far as I'm aware, and it is in the possession of a charity called Historic Royal Palaces, and they manage it. So it certainly isn't the Queen's personal possession. And if anything, the Tower of London drives home the point that you don't need royals in a place in order to get the tourists, because it is hugely popular, and the royals haven't been living in it for a very, very long time. Anyway, thank you everybody for comments and things. We've got lots of people online watching and commenting. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, if that's okay with you guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very quick last thoughts, or?
Well, as I said, we're talking about costs. It is of course not truly about that. That's not why we want to replace the monarchy with a republic, but it is an important aspect that we felt we needed to address, because it's something that we face a lot while discussing this issue.
No, completely agree, because we've got the debate in Holland as well. Obviously, I think with the cost for the monarchy, you have a stick to hit with. as our main point of it's not democratic. Is much more vague to defend. If you can show, and we do, and we keep on doing that this royal family costs so much more. It is something very, very particular, which I think attracts to a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay, so just very finally, there's a comment earlier from Rob Dwyer asking if Republic in the UK supports directly elected or indirectly elected head of state. That's something we're going to come back to. We're going to do another one of these, I think, about what sort of republics we want. So keep an eye out on that. And yeah, again, thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap it up there. So appreciate all the comments and the audience, and thank you very much to Floris and Ollie for
thank you so much
for joining in the conversation. Okay, good night.
Good night.